So I'm here in my office at work, staying late. I'm the only one here. Everybody else, I guess, worked from home today. Um, but I took this opportunity right before I left work to take a look at Genesis 14. And Genesis 14 is about um, the kings that waged war against one another in the ancient land of Canaan. Talks about these five kings from the east rising. I'm sorry, it wasn't five kings from the east. It was four kings from the east that were rising up against five other kings. So it was almost like, it sounds like a world war, all these kings fighting each other, but really this was just contained to that one area where we have modern day Israel, close to the Dead Sea. And it's so interesting, these crazy Old Testament names. This is where you start to see some of the names and you're like, whoa, these are some crazy names, like Kadolimer. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it right. And I don't even remember the other names. They don't stand out to me because they're not normal names like Dave and Jessica. Like it's Chedolimer or something. So, you got to try to look past some of these names. These were names of real individuals. These were names of real people. They're not just characters. They're not made up. These are kings that actually did fight. And, their kingdoms were not, maybe they weren't these large kingdoms, but they were, regardless, they were kings, they were leaders over a certain group of people. And what we see happen here is we see that the four kings actually take ground. They take ground on the five kings, and it says that the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. And what ended up happening was Sodom and Gomorrah was the area where Abram's nephew Lot had settled, and Lot ends up getting taken captive by I guess these kings that were waging war, Chedorlaomer and whoever else. So Abram, we see here that he's got over 300 trained servants ready to go. They're ready to go into battle. He's got his own little militia, and they go out. Once Abram hears the news that Lot was taken captive by these enemies, he ends up attacking them overnight, and he ends up getting back a lot of the goods and the spoils that were taken by these kings, as well as the captives. So he returns to his land, and then he ends up giving a tenth of what he has gained, all the spoils, all the goods, all the wealth, all the possessions that he collected when he defeated the enemies. He goes to a priest and a king. His name was Melchizedek. I know how to pronounce that one. So Melchizedek, he's actually referenced in the New Testament as well. Melchizedek was not just a king, he was also considered a high priest too as well. So this is before any of the laws were given to the Jewish people about how they should have their orders of their high priests. Melchizedek was, he's the first mentioned here in the Bible as being a high priest to God, really. So he's acting as a mediator. He's acting as a mediator between Abram and God. And what Abram does is he goes to Melchizedek, and as a sign of respect, not to Melchizedek, but as a sign of respect, as a sign of reverence to God, he tithes. He gives a tenth of the spoils, and he does it. And he does it He does it first. He does it first. So what I see here is, the teachings that you hear in church about tithing. A lot of it kind of draws back to this initial act of obedience, or I should say faith, that Abram had. Abram was not told to tithe. He was not coerced into tithing. He chose to tithe. So when I think of tithing, I don't think of it as something that anybody can put on you, that is something you have to do. but I think of tithing as a sign, as a general act of respect and reverence towards God. Now, I've tithed before, but I also don't tithe right now. And I'm not afraid to admit that, because my views on tithing are not the same as a lot of church organizations. A lot of church organizations, they have budgets to meet. They have financial planning that they have to do to run their organization. They have bills to pay. So tithing is a practice that they're going to really cling to and hold on to. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times there's too much emphasis on it, and that draws people away from God. So I don't put a lot of emphasis on tithing when I talk about the church, when I talk about what we should and shouldn't be doing. But when I look back at what Abram did, I think of Abram being a cheerful giver. He is thankful. He is grateful that he was able to overtake these enemies with his 300 servants and actually rescue Lot from captivity. So he is going to worship God. We don't see this any other place, that he gave a tenth to Melchizedek before this. We see it now. So those are my thoughts on it. I'm sure I'll talk about tithing some more as we start to go along in the Bible. But ultimately, I think if you feel convicted to tithe, if you feel it's something that is on your heart to do, then I think we have to do everything in faith, because what is not of faith is sin. So I would say if you're feeling the urge to tithe, if you feel like it's something you should do, don't do it out of guilt. Don't do it out of someone coercing you into doing it. Do it because you're cheerful and you want to worship God that way. And, I also look at things like this, like, well, we generally in our culture today look at tithing as a 10% of the money. But what about your time too as well? Do we give God 10% of our time? Do we give him 10% of, our actual goods, like what we have in our house, in our fridge, in our pantries? There's a lot of ways you could really look at tithing. Back then, they were tithing agriculture and livestock. So it's we can get into this some more, and by no means am I a tithing expert, but I do believe that, if I have nothing against people who do tithe. I think tithing is a genuine sign of reverence and love towards God and worship. But if it's something that you're doing out of guilt, if it's something you're doing out of coercion, then I would take a step back, and I would ask yourself why you're doing it and what God really does want you to do. I firmly believe that, no matter what we do with our money, whether we're giving 10% or 0%, 100% of what we do as far as our money and our possessions has to glorify God. So you could have somebody taking 10% of their money and tithing it, and they could be taking the other 90% and being slothful and wasteful with it. So it all comes down to your heart, really. That's the way that I've looked at it. That's the way that I see Jesus teaching about it. So that's our little mini exposition right here on tithing from Genesis 14. It wasn't the main focus of Genesis 14. I think it was more about Lot being rescued and the kings, but it is an important element that a lot of pastors will turn to when they try to enforce that you should be tithing in your church. So just wanted to put that out there. Hope you guys have a wonderful, blessed day. I'm going to head out of the office and over to my discipleship group now. Take care.